So I want you to imagine that you're a combat veteran. You've been overseas and you've seen some unimaginable things that humanity has to offer. Friends dying, had to do some unspeakable acts. And when you come back, the Department of Defense prescribes a bunch of pills to help with the trauma that's been involved. What ends up happening all too often is these pills lead to negative side effects, sleeplessness, anxiety, and much, much more. You see, there's over 22 suicides per day for veterans that come back home from combat and cannot cope with the reality that we're living in. And to expand that, over 120 suicides per day happen in the United States with U.S. adults. That's far too many people that are dying of suicide. And what we have not only is a problem with this, but there's a treatment problem. There are not enough options in alternative medicine for treatment for these types of things. What we're going to talk about today is PTSD. June is PTSD Awareness Month, and I'm a veteran myself of the Marine Corps, and this is a topic near and dear to my heart. But I want people to understand that PTSD does not only lie within combat veterans or first responders. Anyone can experience symptoms of PTSD. Now, first, let's talk a little bit about that, because what we can do to help that here at My Florida Green is we can create a little bit of awareness. We can talk about some of these symptoms that are related to PTSD, and we can talk about some alternative treatment options, because what we do know is a lot of the current conventional synthetic pharmaceuticals that are out right now can cause massive side effects and long-term issues with long-term use. So we're going to break some of that down today. So PTSD, what is that? It's a mental condition that can develop when someone experiences or witnesses traumatic events. And there's a common stigma that, like I said, that it's only with, first responders and military and people like that, but that's not the case. So, with some triggering events that could create a PTSD-like symptoms, war, of course, some type of assault, natural disasters and living through those, serious accidents, terrorist acts and living through that, rape, threats of death, sexual violence, serious injuries, and much, much more. Severe traumatic events can happen to anybody, and it could be a series of smaller events that created post-traumatic stress disorder, otherwise known as PTSD. So, and this condition is not new. This is something that we've heard over the years, but it just came in different names. Things like shell shock, combat fatigue, soldier's heart, combat stress reaction. Those are some of the military versions that we've heard. But as we know in today's society, that trauma is not limited to that. So some of the symptoms that we can look for someone like that, because the reality is often people with PTSD are not very vocal about these symptoms. They're not, they're emotionally introverted a lot of times because the stress and the trauma is just too much to bear and to bring forward to the forefront. So it's really important that we as friends, loved ones, and family members can identify some of these things so we can maybe get someone help before it becomes too late. So here's some of those signs. So one of them is intrusion, right? And what that is intrusive thoughts. Some of these repeated memories that kind of continue to pop up in someone's head. Involuntary memories like nightmares is often the form that it takes. Flashbacks, if something triggering happens, someone may be visibly distraught. These are things that we want to look out for, intrusive thoughts. Another one is avoidance. A lot of times, it's things that remind this person of the trauma. Being around people can be difficult. So avoiding people, avoiding public places, avoiding certain objects or events that may have occurred around that time. All of those can be triggering for someone that has PTSD, and you want to kind of be mindful of those types of things. Alterations in cognition and mood, the inability to remember certain things or important aspects of that traumatic event is often very common. Negative thoughts that kind of come into the mind that kind of lead to these distorted beliefs about oneself can often be common, and kind of displacing that event and that trauma back onto their own self-view, which can be very detrimental to any human being. And then alterations in how someone reacts. And this can also be in the form of just someone being very irritable or having angry outbursts very frequently. Someone that kind of is a bit paranoid or overly watchful of their surroundings, problems concentrating in sleeplessness. Those are all common symptoms of someone that has PTSD or has PTSD-like symptoms or traumatic events. Let's talk about some of the modern medicine that's out there today. So if someone goes into their doctor and reports some of these symptoms related to PTSD, their doctor might prescribe a concoction of pills. And among them is often benzodiazepines, and these are in the family of drugs that include Xanax, Klonopin, Valium, Ativan, things like that. And these drugs can provide some relief for someone in the beginning, but then often the side effects start to kind of kick in and they can be very devastating. For example, Xanax has over 13 different side effects. And among them are addiction, or even worse, a deepening state of depression, which is something you're trying to use it to get away from, which can happen. And prolonged use of any kind of benzodiazepine can lead to short-term memory loss. I've seen it firsthand from people who've come in that have been on these quite some time, and it can be very disheartening for those folks because they're trying to learn and pay attention to what we're trying to show them, and it's very difficult to retain information. I have seen the other side of that in 7-month follow-up appointments, and I got to tell you, it's a much different turnaround for many, many people. So there is hope out there. And then veterans. Veterans are often put on a whole concoction of pills. There's a fantastic documentary I highly recommend watching called Unprescribed, and it very much illustrates in a very visceral way how this impacts combat veterans particularly. But I got to tell you, I've seen it firsthand as well. Veterans come in on multiple freezer bags full of pills that they're taking. And the common description I hear over and over and over again from my fellow veterans and even their family members is they feel like a zombie. That is not a state of living that's waiting to die. Okay? No one should feel like that, especially when they're already feeling distressed from PTSD. And that is a common reaction to a lot of the drugs that the DOD will put our veterans on. I'm not a doctor, okay? But I can read. And in today's landscape, it is so critical that we take health into our own hands. It's important that we do our own homework to find out what is right for us. Okay, what can I do differently than maybe what some of my predecessors have done that have not gotten good results with some of these other modern medicine interventions? That brings us to alternative treatment options. And there is a plant-based alternative option that can be very beneficial, and it's called medical marijuana. And what it can do is it can significantly reduce that fight response that happens when people with PTSD are triggered with their traumatic events. THC can significantly assist sleep for those sleepless nights for some of those symptoms. And it can help relieve some of the nightmares that go along with that type of sleep. So it can really be significantly helpful. And not to mention, here in the MyFlorida platform, we have over 40,000 patients with thousands and thousands of very positive outcomes. So if you or a member of your family or a close friend is suffering from PTSD-like symptoms, maybe they've seen their doctor, maybe they've went down the modern medicine route and they found that these are interventions that are not working for them, or worse yet, are making them worse. Go to myfloridagreen.com, click Get Started, and we want to help. And just a side note for everyone out there, if you know a veteran who might be experiencing these things, it may be difficult for them to talk about. Okay, but I just want you to know, and you can tell them, here at My Florida Green, we recertify our veterans at no charge. Veterans only pay us one time and never again, because we very much believe in what we do here, and we want to help. We need to reduce that 22 suicides per day, and we're going to start right here at My Florida Green. So check us out. Come on down. Like, comment, subscribe. We're here for you.